Follow me with your shape-shifting smiles and I see you. Maybe they'll believe you. Illuminati, occult dawn trial, silver discs and hidden files, and we see you. We've got to believe you. Blast off. Blast off. Blast off. Blast off.
Blast off, Wolfpack, on another epic episode of the Hyper Anomalous Esoteric Research Organization podcast. Been having people reach out. Oh man, you're back. I'm not back. I'm just here. There's stuff that's so important that I feel like I need to talk about it. And while I am not delving into everything, there's stuff so important, things having to do with our national parks, things having to do with our health. Let me get into the health thing first. This is crazy. There is very much this belief. I talked about the apostles' diet, basically eating what our ancestors ate. People talk about often, oh, why is everybody in the Bible living so long? And nowadays we don't live that long. Well, they were eating differently. And it wasn't just what they were eating, it was how they were eating. Yeah, they were eating things like grains. They were eating things like fish. They were eating vegetables. And that's not what we're eating anymore. It's not just what they were eating, it's how they were eating. And I think that the Rockefeller, let's just call it the Rockefeller era, right? We have public relations campaigns by people like Bernays, who historically sold us a bill of goods that was just not accurate. You know, we hear things like, breakfast is the most important meal of the day. We hear things like, you should have bacon and eggs for breakfast. These are all PR campaigns. These are spin doctors that did this. I love bacon and eggs, don't get me going. But the point is that historically, our ancestors, what they were eating when they were living to extreme ages, they were eating in a fasted state, okay? And if you haven't looked into Bernays and what he was doing, it's pretty amazing. Bernays, believe it or not, still has his genetic touch on today's society. But Edward Louis Bernays was an Austrian-American pioneer in the field of public relations. Now, I should know, I think I'm qualified to know about this because public relations is actually I went to school for it. You know, that was my study of choice, was mass communications, public relations, conflict resolution. I really went deep into this. Of course, I went into hotel management, a few other things, got certified as a mediator, got into graduate level studies. But when it comes down to it, I was blown away by public relations. And Edward Bernays was a genius at this, okay? He was also Sigmund Freud's nephew. Very important. He also, okay. So he's very controversial, and I'll tell you why. He had advocacy of mass manipulation through mass communication. He was a notorious advocate of propaganda. And he was compared to a number of fascists. He was related to Sigmund Freud, and some people consider him the father of mass propaganda, mass manipulation, using the hypodermic needle theory, which is basically if you have a hypodermic needle, right, and you put a thought in there, you can shove it into somebody, you can inject it into somebody's psyche, and they will believe it. And he, when I said he still has his touch today in our mass communication, in our mass hypnosis, in our mass manipulation, he does. Because he is connected to Netflix through Mark Randolph, Netflix co-founder and first CEO. Bernays was Randolph's great uncle, making Bernays' principles of persuasion and understanding human psychology relevant to the PR strategies used in building a revolutionary company like Netflix. So he's still in it to win it, at least his genetic gene pool is. Now, back to bacon and eggs. This is an amazing thing, and this is all going to make sense in a second. Bacon and eggs for breakfast. Edward Bernays orchestrated a famous marketing campaign in the 1920s for the Beechnut Packing Company. He hired doctors to endorse bacon and eggs as a hearty, healthy start of the day. He convinced the American public sales were down. They needed to sell. Beechnut needed to sell bacon. And this is how bacon and eggs became the American breakfast, right? There's nothing more American than bacon and eggs. It seems as American as Old Glory, as the flag, as American as apple pie. And it became associated because of the granddaddy, this mass manipulator of advertising, Mr. Edward Bernays. Okay, so let's get back to business. Our ancestors didn't eat this way. And what I mean is breakfast is to break the fast. The biblical ancestors, those practicing the apostles' diet, those practicing eating healthy, they were thriving in a fasted state. Because when you thrive in a fasted state, what I mean is they didn't used to eat breakfast. They ate when they were hungry. They didn't just eat because they woke up. That's mass hypnosis, mass manipulation, public relations, totally spinning the narrative. Getting people obese, having them buy more bacon, having them rely on this Rockefeller era public relations. Yes, the body can thrive in a fasted state by switching to fat-burning ketosis for energy, enhancing cellular cleanup, basically improving insulin sensitivity, and boosting brain function. This is reflecting ancestral patterns of feast and famine. It activates your stem cells to heal when you sleep. So if you have a problem, and I'm going to get into a funny problem I have today. I'm leaving today on a 6-day ski trip. Wait till you hear what happened. But this reflects our ancestral patterns. We activate our stem cells to heal parts of the body when we're sleeping, and then we wake up reinvigorated, and the body is being used the way it's designed to be used. It helps with brain function, hormonal changes, cellular repair, metabolic switching. And you have to listen to your body. So anyway, I have to get that out. All right, so leaving today on a 6-day ski trip. You won't believe what happened yesterday as I'm rushing around to pay bills, get everything in order, take care of stuff before I leave town. Well, I had to pay a bunch of water bills, and as I'm running up the stairs, I break my toe. Yeah, broke my toe. 6-day ski trip coming up, broke my toe. God has a sense of humor. Let's just say I'm going to be doing everything except skiing on this trip, but it is funny. So I need some of that metabolic switching, some of that cellular repair, some of those stem cells being activated to get my function back. But kind of funny. That's what's going on. before we go any further, if you haven't been over to heroparanormal.com, check it out. That's that. Okay, so our national parks. I mentioned our national parks. This is wild. For a long time, people have maintained that the Grand Canyon is not what it appears to be. They have maintained that the Grand Canyon had historic, dare I say, almost Egyptian-like items found and artifacts, caves, maybe even a temple. This all comes from a 1909 newspaper story in the Arizona Gazette. And even though there seems to be no credible archaeological evidence that the Smithsonian Institution came in with other groups like the CCC allegedly and contributed to pulling these things out of there. But this is where it gets really interesting. Is the story in the 1909 Arizona Gazette featured a gentleman, an explorer named G.E. Kincaid, and a supposed archaeologist, Professor S.A. Jordan. So the story persisted, and basically it talked about these Grand Canyon Egyptian objects. It was called Explorations in the Grand Canyon, and I will pop up an image of this here at some point. And Explorations in the Grand Canyon, the 1909 article, basically said that this gentleman saw a cave. He went inside. There were all kinds of Egyptian artifacts, amazing stuff that he could not believe. And that eventually, allegedly, groups like the Smithsonian came in and pulled all these things out. Well, there's more bad news over at the Grand Canyon, as if these stories being, debunked by major gatekeepers isn't everything. There's more to this. All the hotels on the Grand Canyon National Park's South Rim are to be closed indefinitely. That's right, I said it. Closed indefinitely. Nobody knows exactly why. There are some theories, and pretty good ones. There's a Trans-Canyon pipeline in the middle of being replaced. It was originally built in the 60s, but after several breaks in the past 6 years, it was decided it needed to be replaced. Work has begun last year. You can see helicopters moving equipment and stuff of that nature, but some in the conspiracy world allege that there's more. That maybe all this moving of Earth has something to do with something else. Maybe all these helicopters have something to do with something else. And it is a very interesting possibility. Now, there are a number of really high-end hotels down there in the Grand Canyon. And one of them, the most high-end hotel, is one where people often go by helicopter. And to give you a list of some, well, all right. The stories are long and varied. But one of the most impressive stories from a CEO that I heard, I won't name who he's a CEO of, but he said that he went down there, flew in on a helicopter, beautiful place. You're down in it to win it, in the Grand Canyon. And he said that he started walking towards a mountain, and that somebody from the hotel came and ran down the trail, got him and said, hey, we're not allowed to go over there. And he said, why not? He said, I can't get into that. I don't want to get into that. All I can tell you is you're not allowed to go into that region. You got to turn around and come back to the resort. So he did. But he found that this was very odd. So there's that. There's the Grand Canyon and this closing, which is very interesting. Okay. What else we got going on? Oh, yeah. We've got some other really interesting things taking place. We have all of these images of Trump with models at an event suggesting that they were underage Epstein victims. None of them were underage. We have a number of images coming out about the Epstein, and it's fascinating. People like Steve Bannon, Richard Branson, Bill Gates. I mean, anybody who's anybody is in these pictures. It's the who's who, right? And it's really fascinating how we're finding out that everybody was involved with this. Like, absolutely everybody was involved. And, you know, one of the models with this famous image of Trump, with all these models, one of the models said, "Hey, I was 22 years old, and I remember him being very nice. He was a very gentlemanly, and that's the word we use to describe him." But this hoax is trying to pull it off, showing these models. It actually blurs out their faces. I don't know if you've seen this. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 models. It's blurred out their faces to make them look young, or it's blacked out their faces to make them look young. If you see the actual photo, they're like, 22 and up. Very interesting. Very interesting indeed. So it's being used, again, back to public relations. It's being used to hurt people. But some of the images are very interesting. Specifically, my favorite images are a set of 10 images that were shared. I guess they're all over the dark web. Then they came out. Then they're shared more. But my favorite 10 images I found were mind-blowing. I found them over at Isaac Weishaupt. If you know my friend Isaac Weishaupt, he's the one that I saw share them kind of virally. But it's not so much people, it's more the grounds and some of the symbolic stuff on the grounds, letting us know that there's definitely some Baal worship or some esoteric and occult stuff going on. Speaking of fighting that kind of thing, the U.S. military has posted something where a soldier is seen wearing a Jerusalem cross. And this is interesting. The official U.S. Southern Command account posted an image promoting Operation Southern Spear. That, of course, is the ongoing mission focused on disrupting drug trafficking in the Southcom region. What captured the internet's attention was a detail on the soldier's helmet, the Jerusalem cross used by the Kingdom of Jerusalem during the Crusades by orders like the Knights of the Holy Sepulchre. And within hours, the post went viral. Many praised the image, saying it was powerful to see a Christian symbol appear in official U.S. military media. Of course, then you had your others who argued the helmet should only display the American flag and that the Jerusalem cross is something that is bad, and it's not. It's something that historic orders used. It's a sign of faith, a symbol of faith. I don't see any problem with that, but there are those whack jobs that believe that the Jerusalem cross is something bad, even though that's I hate to say it, but every symbol, if you look for it, has something bad in it. And it is what it is. If you look at some of the most feared symbols like the swastika and go way back, it's originally like a sun symbol of prosperity, fertility. It goes all the way back to Africa and beyond. And these were symbols that had nothing negative about them at all. But as time progresses and people add this negative connotation, they become something else. I think it's the same with a lot of these things, these symbols. So that's interesting. Pretty cool that Southern Spear, Operation Southern Spear, the official U.S. Southern Command, is posting images of them fighting this evil, in my opinion. What else we got going on? We've got, let's see. We have pretty amazing stuff going on where a CIA pilot says that the moon is a constructed spaceship and was traveling or towed here. You most likely know who that CIA pilot is. It's the late, great John Lear, somebody I considered a friend, somebody I trusted. He was definitely on the cutting edge of cosmic disclosure, and somebody that a lot of people, his stories got so wild that people just kind of threw the baby out with the bathwater. But I respected John Lear very much. What he says is that there was a train to travel what he calls a copper highway. And he doesn't know where it goes, but it's very silent, very fast. And he claimed that they've taken thousands of people over the years over there. He didn't say exactly where it's going again. And he believed that our solar system is not what it appears to be, that Earth is not what it appears to be, and that the moon is not what it appears to be. The moon, he claimed, was more or less kind of like an object, a created object, and that it was towed into its orbit now about 15,000 years ago, just after the Ice Age, when man first became aware of the skies. And he says that there was two moons, and then there was one moon, and now we believe there's just one. But the two moons, the second moon was the vehicle that pulled it into its location currently. He also, when we had private conversations, he told me that the backside of the moon is used as some sort of a soul catcher. And that when we die, they somehow, that it's a technology that he also claimed that there was an interesting train here in Vegas, a maglev train. And he gave me some of the locations, some of the entrances to it. And I went and checked him out. And let me just say, everything he said was not hooey. He had some very interesting information, to say the least. Okay, so another interesting information, Marco Rubio's back in the news, Secretary of State Marco Rubio. He says that there is a secret UFO program hidden from presidents, and I have verified this, believe it or not, over this past week, talking to people. And I believe that this is verified information. Rubio is saying the the truth. He's saying the very thing that people have said for years, that presidents are not read into these unacknowledged programs. He said Navy pilots, admirals, generals, and others with very high clearances are. Anyway, they have privately told him that there are programs inside the U.S. government that not even presidents are made aware of. This makes sense. If true, this lines up with years of claims about deep black SAPs, special access programs, and legacy programs operating outside the traditional oversight of our government. This is something big. This is something big if you're following this, because this is basically a need to know, right? And if a president doesn't need to know, they're not going to read him in. There's also another prodigy scientist that has revealed allegedly what's inside Area 51. Rocket man David Adair has revealed never before told secrets from his 1971 trip to Area 51, exposing what he claims is actually there. Technology still far beyond what we use today. He says that they have, well, he went down into a hangar door, and sitting in there, he said, just imagine if you put landing gears on an arrowhead. That's what it looked like. A big arrowhead-shaped aircraft with landing gear on it. And you could tell that it was a Delta. It looked like literally the tip of a spear. He said it was huge. And David Adair is an interesting guy, you know, and I've talked to people who are actually out at Area 51 often. And I can tell you that even no matter how closely you befriend these people, they won't tell you what's going on out there. So when you stick people like David Adair out there and he's telling you that there's these amazing places where shops and offices and people working in there, that there's an underground base, a hangar base, that there are these arrows. And he also said that he saw this aircraft, these other aircraft that look like teardrops, and he's never seen anything like that. One interesting story I heard was of a golden teardrop. These are allegedly what the reptilians fly. Now, keep in mind that David Adair, they called him the Rocket Man. He was a prodigy scientist revealing what's in there. And he would have the capacity. It is verified that he's been out by people close to him out there. Now, he's not out there as often as people I know and have talked to. But again, at least he's saying something. The people I'm talking to say very little about their jobs, what they're doing out there, etc. In another interesting document that I was going through that came across my desk here was field resonance propulsion concepts. Now, these interestingly go back all the way to the same date, more or less, when David Adair visited Area 51. This field resonance propulsion concept outlines a speculative propulsion model proposing that spacecraft could achieve interstellar or even intergalactic travel by creating a resonance. You heard me right. Just vibration, right? You come back to those hermetic laws that everything vibrates on its own level. But this speculative propulsion, if this is true, this is fascinating. Spacecraft could achieve interstellar or even intergalactic travel by creating a resonance between electromagnetic fields and gravitational fields. The theory assumes that space-time is a projection of a higher dimensional reality and that the electromagnetic and gravitational forces are fundamentally interconnected, drawing on astrophysical phenomena such as black holes, solar flares, and the energy-generating coherent pulsed megasis or mega Gauss electromagnetic fields. You could tune these fields, adjusting them to natural harmonics of distant space-time points, causing a forced relocation to that coordinate. The proposed system uses high-powered lasers, magnetic field line merging, and hydromagnetic wave modulation to create the required waveform. While the concept is highly theoretical and based on unproven assumptions, the study argues that pursuing research in these areas could lead to major breakthroughs in future propulsion and energy technologies. And we're talking about the 1970s. I've got to take a sip of my coffee here. This is mind-blowing. Okay, 1970s. So pretty fascinating stuff. Now, he's not the only one that has said these types of things. We have U.S. Army Sergeant Clifford Stone, who's claimed he was granted special access to extraterrestrial craft and beings, and he's mimicked a lot of this stuff. He's parroted a lot of these things. In fact, he went on further, saying that some of these extraterrestrial beings, he learned to communicate with them, right? He learned to communicate with them. That he gets very emotional when he talks about these encounters with these beings, some of which were unwilling guests of the U.S. government. And I really like that, the way he puts that. Unwilling guests, in other words, they're prisoners. And we've heard this from other Area 51 whistleblowers. In fact, a gentleman named Bill Uhouse has shared information on what the aliens are after and the deals that they've made with what he calls satellite government. We're talking about essentially a cabal, a shadow government, right? And a group that has far-reaching power and components in the government, like, well, ties to the CIA and other three-letter agencies. We don't know who these people are or how they're exactly funded. There are some theories. But basically, Bill Uhouse claimed that he was a former Marine pilot and Air Force engineer who worked on secret projects at Area 51. He said he helped build a flying saucer simulator and even met an extraterrestrial known as J-Rod after a supposed UFO crash. Now, this is pretty fascinating stuff. We've heard about J-Rod before from a number of people. And when a number of people are giving the same name to something, it starts to tie everything together. And if you're hearing different people talking about J-Rod, if they're mimicking, if they're saying the same information about human biologics, non-human biologics, and this contact and interconnectivity, this communication between us, somewhere, someplace, this stuff seems to be happening. Let's move on to Colonel Carl Nell. He basically talked about craft and non-human biologics. He said it was light years ahead. Officials have claimed reverse engineering programs do exist. He's one of them. He says non-human bodies, that's correct, somewhere in this country, someplace in this program, these are being housed. These craft, there are craft that are being held from the public, and people are not talking about the fact that they have landed, they have been recovered, they are here. Very much along the lines of what David Grush has said. So here we have a colonel, Carl Nell. He came on to Fox News and he said, that's correct. Non-human bodies. The former U.S. Army colonel was interviewed, and when he asked him a question about craft and quote-unquote aliens, non-human biologics, he said the following exact quote: somewhere in this country there are craft that have landed here or crashed here, and there are biologics, non-human bodies. One of the clearest confirmations ever stated on mainstream television other than David Grush himself. So something's going on. Now, if you don't believe this kind of thing can happen, this thing can happen naturally, even in our own ecosystem, in our own environment. Naturally, these things can happen where we get cross-pollination of one species into another. And I am actually going into Arizona today. But something very fascinating, allegedly that has transpired is that there is a new jaguar, allegedly, that has been spotted thriving in southeast Arizona. And this is kind of wild, because this is via 13 News / Arizona EDU. A brand new jaguar has been spotted roaming southeast Arizona, marking only the 5th confirmed jaguar seen in the state since 2011. Researchers at the University of Arizona's Wildcat Center say the big cat, nicknamed Cinco, was photographed on 3 different days in November. Over the last 15 years, scientists have documented hundreds of detections of 4 other jaguars that occasionally move through the mountain ranges south of Tucson. Cinco is the newest addition and appears healthy, according to researchers. Now, we're talking about a jaguar with spots. You know, the type of thing you would expect in the rainforest. Now, the exact location isn't being released, which is standard practice to protect rare wildlife, but trail camera data is helping scientists study how jaguars are using Arizona's borderland mountain corridors. And experts say that this sighting highlights how important these natural pathways are for sustaining populations of endangered species. So the same could be happening with extraterrestrial, non-human biologics, whatever you want to call them, cosmic intruders, cosmic intelligences, non-human intelligence. They could very much be using pathways to sustain populations and to do research. I don't see why not. Now, a lot of people are saying, this is all BS, when you go back into this stuff. But I'd like to point out that even Bill Cooper, the late, great Behold a Pale Horse, a lot of people have, tried to debunk Bill Cooper. Bottom line, the guy got shot in the back, also in Arizona. And, he wasn't perfect. None of us are. But he said that he had a UFO sighting that changed his life forever. He said that he saw a UFO underwater, the size of one of our smallest aircraft carriers, which is still absolutely huge underwater. He saw it come out of, and he was not a UFO guy, but this was with the Navy. He said he saw it come out of the water and without making a sound. He saw the most incredible thing, in his words, that he's ever seen in his life. It had such a profound effect upon him that it changed his entire direction. And this may be why naval intelligence is so high on the list when it comes to these UFO and UAP, USO events. I believe there is something naval. And so does Tim Burchett. If you've noticed, he's been talking a lot and talking to people, whistleblowers and confidants that are telling him that there are, in fact, bases deep in the oceans where these things are. Maybe they're not from out of this world at all. Maybe they're from under our oceans. With that, I'll leave you. Keep your eyes to the skies, feet on the ground. Don't forget to take a look around. Have a very blessed weekend. Love you guys.
Esoteric Research Organization.
Hero paranormal, always setting up the pace, man. Crop circle tipping, Illuminati still tripping. Making those ears perk up, gonna make you question your earth. You better. Mystery bloodlines and secret society. Creepy shapeshifter says, come sit beside me.
Yeah, cozy on up.
So what's with all this spiral?
Acting like UFOs.
So people in space wolf tiptoe through the dark. Third eye blinding, tune in and blast off, blast off.
Blast off, baby.